Utopia, dystopia, and today's technology hosted by Johannes, bringing a global conversation discussing technologies that affect us all.
Hello and welcome. My name is Johannes, and I am the host of this show. I am here today with Dorothea Baur, who is an independent consultant and a speaker, including TEDx, a writer and a lecturer on ethics, responsibility and sustainability with a specific focus on tech and finance. She helps companies align value with values. Okay, I'm really happy to speak to you today, Dorothea. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Johannes. Absolutely my pleasure.
Great, great. Well, let's talk about the topic today is democratization of AI. It's a ethical discussion, but focused on around the topic of democratization of AI. And could you please start by telling me what do we generally mean when we talk about democratization of AI?
Well, democratization has become a popular term, not just applied to AI, but for basically meaning giving people access to. And so that means making it democratic or democratize it means spreading out AI so that anyone can use it. And that's how democratization of AI is used. And I'm not a big fan of that use of the term, as I might explain later.
Yeah, so you've written an article actually that says no, we do not want to democratize AI. Could you say a little bit about that and why are you so opposed to this term of democratization of AI?
Well, that was, of course, titles are always a bit provocative. And saying, no, we don't want to democratize AI, if you take it in the meaning that I just described, like, no, we don't want to make it possible for everyone to use AI, it might come across as elitist and exclusionary. And that's totally not what I mean. But in that piece or in general, I dig into what democracy and democratization actually mean. And I am convinced that democracy does not boil down to just including people or giving people access, and that it shouldn't be used, especially because democratization of AI is often used by commercial actors. So when they say democratization of AI, it just means we want to sell. So, there is no moral quality in it. There is no justice component. It's just a misuse of the term. And I think it's strategically used in order to overcome prejudice and skepticism towards AI and in order to legitimize massive rollout of AI. So yes, I want technological progress in general to be accessible for as many people as possible, but A, not under all circumstances, and B, that's got nothing to do with democratization.
Okay, well, so let's break this down. Why does it not have to do with democratization? You can imagine that. You could imagine, right? So that power, right? So democracy has something to do with power, right? You could imagine that if everyone can use AI, say the way that currently only Google and a few specialists can, and even when I learned to use AI to apply AI to various problems. When I first learned that, I was quite technically involved, right? So I had to learn linear algebra and calculus and a lot of things. So you're very focused on these very highly technical things, and sometimes you might be missing the substantive picture, right? In this process, because your focus is entirely on the technicalities, right? So in that sense, for me, it has freed me up to think about um, much more about the applications themselves and the ins and outs of them. For example, the problem with collaborative filtering, where it always recommends things that are already popular, right? So why do I need to have a recommendation about the Beatles, right? I don't. Nobody needs that, right? Everybody knows the Beatles. So in that sense, you can start thinking about those kinds of things that are much more substantive and qualitative rather than technical. And isn't that beneficial in itself just because it allows you to think about the benefits and the costs much more?
Well, but if I understand you correctly, is what you describe as your approach to learning to understand AI. So you dug into, linear algebra, which I never did. After I was released from high school, I never touched a math book anymore. Or I did at university, but not much longer. So so this felt empowering to you. It empowered you to better understand the tools or that you're confronted with as a user on the internet, and you were probably able to develop some tools yourself, etc. But again, I mean, that's got nothing to do with democratization in terms of making it democratic, because not many people will take this approach to AI, and not many people will dig into linear algebra.
Right.
And it's not what people who say, oh, we're democratizing AI, ChatGPT is the democratization of AI because everyone has access to it. So it's not what the evangelists, usually democratization of AI is used by people who call themselves tech evangelists, which I also find a very weird term.
That's a weird
like
term.
A religious component, a political component. They just appropriate words from whatever context they deem helpful for enlarging or increasing their power. And so that's what I find
but that's
very
power
problematic.
thing. Okay, so increasing the power, right? My power as someone who knows technical things, right, is decreased, and it's given to the people who don't know them, right? So and that's what I was trying to allude to. So I had to learn linear algebra and go through all of these things, and not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the time. Not everybody has the. Some people just will give up, right? They won't do it, right? It's technically it's difficult and so on. You have to dig into it. Yes, it empowered me over others, right? Because those who then can't understand linear algebra will then sort of be exposed to AI sort of in a much more passive way, right? So now it enables these people who don't want to learn linear algebra to still use AI, just the same way as I do, right? So it levels the playing field, if you will. And why not?
Exactly.
And in a way, you could say AI is a power, right? So let's say, okay, democratic systems as we know them, you're right. It probably has not very much to do with that, but you could say that AI is in the hands of those who can learn linear algebra, be hired by companies that have large data sets, right? Because without the data set, even if you learn the linear algebra, it's useless, right? It's not going to do anything unless you have the data. So now suddenly, like, I think this democratization thing, there's a little bit of a kernel of truth there, because you can say that AI, in a sense, is a powerful decision maker, right? Or it can be. And so now, if you're allowing more people to use this powerful decision maker who can go through and sift through all these data and make sense of it and then make a much more rational decision for you, isn't that in some way kind of in the spirit, even not in the letter, of the concept of what democracy is?
I could have interrupted every other sentence of you, but I'm a polite person. No, well, I need to remember now. It's like, oh no, oh no, oh no, this is not true. No, but what is true, what is absolutely true, it is making it more egalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you say, levels the playing, or
The playing
somehow.
field,
Yeah, the playing field. And that's really important. And that's what I acknowledge. I mean, whenever I say democratization of AI, I use quotes.
yeah.
So even recently, I found myself commenting on someone's post on LinkedIn. But listen, it was an interview with an expert who said she does not see the value of a text machine that generates synthetic text about ChatGPT. She's very critical of that. And someone posted, like the journalist posted the interview, and I said I agree with all the many statements of that person, but I disagree with the fact that there is no value. Because exactly ChatGPT allows people to write good text, or at least sufficiently good texts. No, but imagine dyslexic people, for example. Of course, now they have, they have, I say, spell checks, etc. But in general, it empowers people. It gives people a voice which seems to be their own. But okay, that's where we already enter into promise. But I mean, it lowers the barriers to access to the world of written content creators. And I'm not asking questions about the purpose and the meaning, but it has an egalitarian component, and especially the fact that it is free in the case of ChatGPT. We will see where it develops, how it develops, and how they will commercialize it. But yes, egalitarian. And other thoughts? You said something like, wow, so now people don't have to go through the same hard, school like I did with linear algebra, and they get empowered by using AI. And then you said, if I remember correctly, that allows them to make much more rational decisions. I'm like a red flag. And you frame AI as a powerful decision maker, but that's exactly where I struggle, because I'm okay. There is a distinction from a guy, I think it's Narayanan, who writes about AI and snake oil, where he say there are like three types of AI applications. Like one is analytics, like X-ray scanning, and where we make a lot of progress. Then the other one is whatever something, and then like the most complex case is decision making, like predicting. I think the second context is something like judgment, where you use AI, for example, to filter out hate speech online, which is already more complex. So we can be sure that when you apply AI, not necessarily for decision making about the future, but about, is this X-ray, does it show a healthy body, or like does it show something to be worried about? That's where AI is getting better and better. I mean, it's still not there yet, but in the second context, it's already more difficult because you trust AI to distinguish hate speech from non-hate speech, and we all might have different opinions about what constitutes hate speech. So there it already becomes a bit more delicate. And then the third one, prediction, where it is like based on big data that says people like Johannes with the same characteristics who used to do this in the past are likely to do this in the future, and that's why we'll, give him this and this conviction for jail or for a crime he committed or did not commit. So that's why it becomes much more problematic. And then
Right,
the recidivism
Yeah.
case, and that's exactly what I mean. That's when you say AI is a powerful decision maker. I say powerful decisions is the context where you least should use AI. It's the most dangerous context for using AI. Low stake decisions like recommendation algorithms, whether you get a recommendation for the Beatles or for the Stone, doesn't ruin your life. Okay. But high stake, like powerful decisions about, jail time, about access to social services, financials, etc., that's where it becomes really dangerous. So no,
But
I don't think
wait,
that.
hold on. Why
Yeah,
do you say that?
okay.
Because so there I have a question for you there, and with regards to that. So I know it's often, these high stakes situations is an interesting case to me. Namely, we often say, okay, so let's say an AI, an algorithm makes the wrong decision, and we will say, oh, you see, there we go, it's bad, right? But the thing is, let's apply this. Let's find a context where this might actually flip. So suppose you're in Alabama and all the judges are demonstrably racist. The juries that you're going to find are most likely racist because they're going to be admitted by the judge, and the judge has a sort of a gate, is a gatekeeper as to who gets in, right, into the jury. They might just pick racist juries, right? So now let's look at that case and say, well, let's introduce a slightly biased algorithm into this and say, and then ask the person who is up for a recidivism discussion, or for the discussion of whether they should be released from jail, whether they would like to be judged by an algorithm that was built in the Silicon Valley that might be a little bit biased against them, or maybe even a lot, or a racist judge, right? So these are the options, right? Because often the options aren't as perfect as you might want them to be. You might want to say, no, I want to have a fair judge, a fair person, and then you compare that against the algorithm. Then maybe you're right, under certain circumstances, the fair judge might be a better decision maker than the algorithm. but that's not always the option, right? So we have to compare the algorithm against the alternatives. And when you do
No, but I
that,
mean,
sometimes I would prefer an algorithm sometimes, in these cases.
no, yeah, sometimes, but you could also be the opposite. You are whatever in front of a jury that just a totally different scenario. And the thing is, I mean, people are biased. Algorithms are also biased, as you just said, just on a different scale. People are biased it's not always as easy. Like, of course, you have racist juries that will tend to always, uh, give harder sentences to people of color than to other people, etc. Of course, you have these like textbook cases of straight forward racism, black or white. But there's also another type of bias in humans, like being moody. Today, I'm giving you a hard sentence because I've had a fight with my husband the night before, or whatever. Or today, I'm really nice to because you remind me of someone I really appreciate. Or so it's not that easy. And then knowing that people are biased, why does it justify to embed biases into systems that then take these biases as the standard decision making rule? Because
It
whereas
doesn't justify it.
tomorrow,
I agree that it doesn't justify it, but you could say that that in the case of the algorithm, you can over time you can say you can discover the biases, and you can say you can correct for them, and then they will be corrected once and for all, right? Whereas a person is, by the way, also this attaches to this idea that I read a lot about with explainability, right? Humans are absolutely unexplainable. Let's start there, right? Like humans are not explainable. Like you said, there could be a mood swing or this or that. So AI currently is also not explainable. So we got one tomato, another tomato. But it is at least in principle possible to improve the AI in a systematic manner, where you can say, we found that last year this AI system, this algorithm, has been biased in that it had a higher rate of rejecting the proposal that say black people are let out of jail, then it is warranted for the black recidivism rate, let's say, right? So you have to compare it to the actual recidivism rate of black people, say, and then you can say, well, this algorithm is biased in that it, on average, gave it actually pretended or acted as if this rate was actually higher, right? So that would be the bias. But then you can say that, and you can find it out, and then you can sue the company, or you can then say, well, we have to improve the algorithm, and they improve the algorithm, and then it's improved compared to before, right? Where
yeah,
with humans, there's no such thing, right? There's no way that
no,
you can
but I mean,
systematically improve human
uh,
decision making.
you say humans are not explainable,
No.
and that's true, of course. But I will always be able to justify my actions unless, well, even if I did them in a drunk state, I will tell you I was drunk. I can't be held accountable. And that's the thing. Humans are accountable for their actions. If a judge systematically violates rules or whatever, he needs or she needs to fear to be, fired or put in jail. An algorithm has no conscience and faces no consequences. So, of course, this is about liability of the software provider or the liability of those who use it, all these legal questions. So, first of all, humans are accountable as opposed to algorithms directly. They're not accountable. And second of all, if you say, oh, next year we will find out that unfortunately we have been using an algorithm that was totally skewed and that was totally unfair, how many lives have been affected? How many people have spent that year in jail? So it's absolutely not. We can't do away with people, and especially what I also struggle with, and that also leads back to the whole democratization. It's a very binary view of democratization because it's always like algorithms are always about the outcome. So it's either a yes or no, or jail or no jail, etc. But when in fact, democracy, as much as a process in court, is a lot about deliberation. We exchange arguments, we form opinions. And while I'm talking to the person in court, they form their opinion, they listen to me. So it's a very discursive process, and delegating such processes to algorithms, be it in court or in democracy, or in democratic context, or labeling it as democratic, is just getting it all wrong. Even more so because algorithms, as you know, or like machine learning, is notoriously black box style. So
Yeah.
it's really I think it's the worst imaginable context for using such tools.
But even if so, let's say let's move away from the recidivism for a second and go to driving, right? So if it's true that even if a car, if say an automated car, self-driving car, crashes into someone, they're not accountable, and that's a huge problem. And I agree with that. That's an accountability issue. Although the accountability, you could also say, well, it is accountable in the sense that we'll improve it now because we now uncovered its mistakes, right? Whereas with the person, if you punish them, you don't know that they're going to improve because of that, right? So with an algorithm, you can literally say, we're going to improve you now. And that's the consequence you're getting, which is unsatisfactory to us because we like to see punishment, right? This is like something psychological, I think, actually. This is not necessarily rational or reasonable even. But then so in the case of self-driving cars, we now know that self-driving cars are invariably safer than the best drivers out there. They crash less, right? Yet every time that they do crash, because every once in a while there will be some conditions that hasn't seen, some kind of flare, something that hasn't been built into or the data hasn't been there, and then it will crash. And then we will freak out, right? And much more so that if another drunk driver crashes somewhere, so what? It's just another drunk driver. I find that in some ways irrational. There is a rational component on that, which is this accountability issue. And then, who you're going to sue if this thing is going to crash into you and damages your car, right? You have no one to sue. You have no recourse in a sense, unless you find out a way to do that by saying maybe this algorithm was developed by XYZ company and they can be liable or something. Somebody has to be liable. I understand this liability issue. But I think that the irrationality of the freakout is much worse than what just this liability issue alone can account for.
Yeah, I know, and it's been a while since I dug into that, self-driving cars debate, because it has been overshadowed or overtaken by the whole generative AI recently. But there are a lot of arguments on why, even though the accident rate of self-driving cars will be much lower than of humans, why it is still morally justifiable to stick to humans as drivers. And I can't really remember all the arguments anymore, but of course it has to do with accountability, and it also a lot of the criticism about self-driving car has to do with vastly exaggerated claims about what they are able to do, with the fact they have been promised prematurely to be all over the place, and so it had, I think a lot of the criticism refers to that, and to the fact that they're actually only safe at the moment in a very narrow context. I recently saw something on TV where they use robot taxis or robot cabs in Phoenix, and they say that's a good place to use it. Phoenix, Arizona has broad streets and a lot of sunlight, so that these are ideal conditions. So I think a lot of criticism also around self-driving cars also refers to kind of untruthful promises or exaggerated like hype, etc. But you're right, from a utilitarian perspective, saying like the greatest happiness of the greatest number, you would have to probably eventually, once they're ready, prefer a self-driving car over humans.
Yeah.
But I haven't really formed a final opinion that I always, of course, I'm a bit critical towards hardcore utilitarian approaches. I'm more of a Kantian, if I have any leaning. Yeah.
But so okay, then that's interesting actually, the Kantian thing. I'm not sure with respect to Kant. I'm also not a utilitarian though, because well, I don't believe that a Western standard of any sort should be hoisted upon the world's population, which is often what people think. You have a good ethical system. Maybe utilitarianism is a good system, but it's not the only system. And some people might find it vastly unjust because they follow a completely different ethical system that is just as legitimate. So this is my problem with these kinds of schools of thought, that they shouldn't be applied widely. They should be applied to people who are. They should be applied to other utilitarians, and that's it, pretty much. But the side, that's my own view on that. I myself, I'm much more inspired by the capability approach that was put forward by Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, which is actually all about involving the people, or it's at least in part involving the people who are affected by decisions, whether they are done by AI or by humans. I think actually the distinction there is not that important, really. It's about decisions, really. I think these ethical systems, they're not really about who makes them. That's a kind of a new problem that hasn't been addressed by these systems, I think, directly. But this question of who makes them is an interesting one still, nevertheless. And I do still think, I feel like you haven't convinced me yet quite that it isn't, even though you're right about, so this thing that some people's lives might be damaged in the process. It's the same is also true if humans badly make decisions about recidivism, say, for example, for 1 year, except that you might never know, right? So the good thing about algorithms is that you can actually say that they were biased. You can say that they have these and that kind of property, and that these properties are problematic and that they can be improved. And then you have a sort of, they're in a way self-documenting. You can figure out what is going wrong with them, right? So with humans, even though they're not explainable, they have this lesser, explainability, of course, would be very nice, but that is lacking across the board. Humans are not explainable, as I said before. And I think this is why the standard is so, this demanding standard of them having to be explainable, to me doesn't make that much sense, because I think that we should always compare it to the next thing. So in the self-driving car scenario, we can make a nice little comparison and say, well, how many accidents happen by the average human driver, by the best human drivers? We can compare it to something, right? Whereas with the recidivism algorithm, for some reason, we never make that comparison. We say, oh, this algorithm is biased, therefore we should have humans. No, I don't think that follows. So that's where I don't.
Well, I think one thing is that we're still early days, of the whole discussion also about bias in algorithms, and everything that has come to light might only be the tip of the iceberg. True. So we have now known unknowns, but we still have a lot of unknown unknowns. And, algorithms, or the whole AI debate, really has highlighted a lot of social injustices due to its meticulous statistical pattern recognition that otherwise we would not have detected. So that's really helpful. It's just painful to go through the process of having it applied to people and making unfair decisions or hurting people, whatever, the whole bias thing. But I still think there are a lot of unknown unknowns, and that's what also bothers me. And when you say, so when we develop a self-driving car, we have a benchmark, how many accidents do human drivers cause, how many accidents do self-driving cars cause, but we can't really trust self-driving cars to be there because they have not been released into the same unpredictable, crazy, loud environment that human drivers have been released into. And so all the development of technology or of tools that we use, of engines, has always been done under the premise: how can we create engines that are best suited for human use, and that don't exploit human weaknesses, but rather make it difficult to be abused, etc. So it was always development of engines for human users, and now we're having a totally separate thing. So
but with this
it's much more
democratization,
complex.
so that's interesting. So with this democratization, if we call it that under quotation marks, you could say that an algorithm is sort of an extension of a human, right? You could think of it that way. And so then what we're really doing is we're just kind of giving more the ability to look at a lot more data to a human being in a way, and then sort of deduce things from this large amount of data that a human couldn't do, right? A limitation, because algorithms, as we know them, they literally come from science, right? So we started doing regressions, and we didn't call it algorithms. We didn't call them. AI, we called them statistics, and I think we should still call them that. Actually, it's a trend. It's a nice word, AI, I guess. But really, we've been doing that in order to find out things that we ourselves couldn't, right? And I guess in that way, they are algorithms are based on a sort of scientific way of thinking or scientific way of dealing with the world, using data and so on, and not crazy hunches or the belief in ghosts or something like that might drive human decision, right? So we're allowing people to be superpowered by something that's based on science or a scientific approach in a way.
I mean, honestly, you say super powered. I'm like, oh no, oh no, no, because honestly, that's so much against what we've learned from the Enlightenment. Like
Mm-hmm.
250 years ago, Immanuel Kant saying "Sapere aude," have the courage to use your own understanding, where he told people to liberate themselves from the shackles of gods and
Mm-hmm.
monarchs, etc. And so, because before we used to be, dependent on God's will or on the king's will, and
Yeah.
we didn't make an effort to understand our surroundings, and we didn't have the courage to use our own understanding. And then we had that breakthrough, the Enlightenment, which set in motion the whole, everything, the whole progress, including democracy defined as self-legislation. Give yourself your own
Well, but
laws,
that's
like
older.
people.
That's older
You
than Kant.
create.
That's a Greek concept, right?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, it had been dormant for
Yeah.
a long
Yeah.
time, and then after the Enlightenment, and so by the courage to use our own understanding was a precondition for establishing democratic societies where people were able to contribute and participate,
Mm-hmm.
and where the community of moral agents and patients was
Right.
subsequently extended, etc. So all of that. So now, if we delegate, if we let ourselves be superpowered, I can't even pronounce that word, let ourselves be superpowered and understand this as an improvement, we delegate our whole responsibility,
No.
our freedom to machines. So
Well,
no, no, no,
that's where
no.
that's where I agree with you. We should not do that, but we could. So I think there's a difference between doing that, sort of automating our thinking, and extending our thinking. Right. So we could say we could use AI. This is a possibility. We often don't do that. Maybe we're lazy, and therefore we want to delegate the whole thing on it. Right. So people sit down with ChatGPT and let ChatGPT write the book. What's the point of that? I don't know. Actually, honestly, there's no point to me in this. But instead, if we could say, for example, my wife went to a French school, and so she learned how to structure an essay really well, right? So let's say I didn't go to a French school and I didn't learn that, and in fact I didn't go to school at all as a child, and so I started much later with my educational approach. So I have a little bit of a tendency of having an issue with structuring an essay, for example, right? So I've not done it because I could use, in theory, use ChatGPT to just give me some structure, give me an outline, a structure, a beginning, an end, and a middle, and so on, right? And then, but the thinking really comes from me, right? So it's not to say that I'm going to delegate the whole enchilada to the AI, but I let the AI help me with my weaknesses, so that I can
Yeah,
actually think better. And so a regression, right? Why did we invent during the Enlightenment? We invented actually everything that we now that went into ultimately building AI, right? AI is basically a fancy regression. I mean, not always, but it's based on similar tools, right? It's based on linear algebra, and it's based on a gradient descent often, which is calculus, and it's based on the same basic principles that we base science on to help us overcome our human weaknesses, because our perceptive organism is actually not that great. We can't perceive
no,
all that
but
much.
yeah, no, but I mean, so there's an irony, of course, that the Enlightenment encouraged us to use our own understanding, and we used it so much that we found ways to create things that have a stronger understanding than that are smarter than we are.
In
So
some narrow
it's like
dimension, yeah.
in some, yeah. So it's like in German we say the revolution eats its children. It's like it did the Enlightenment. Is it coming to an end as a consequence of its very own strengths? Are we reverting to times of darkness, black boxes, instead of the black box of God dictating your fate? The black box being an algorithm dictating your fate. But that's just
Wow.
a side remark. Yeah, well, but that's it. Because we thought we were guided by God. Oh, why do I get this disease? It's God's will. So, I mean, why am I sent to jail? Oh, it's the algorithm's will. Whatever. So that's just a side remark. So I find that very, very fascinating to think about. Then the other thing
Yeah.
is, yes, as an extension of ourselves, of course, not in a transhumanist sense, hopefully. That's not what I want to say, but as an extension, yes, sure. I can say I wrote this essay with the help of ChatGPT. I can say I wrote this essay in isolation, just with a sheet of paper and handwriting. And you are transparent about the process, how you created it, and then people will come to a different judgment. They might be more impressed if they see the same with generative AI creating pictures like DALL-E or Midjourney. If I say, well, I have painted this painting by hand, or this is my creative idea, it has a different value, not a higher or lower, but just it appeals to different judgments.
Well, I think art
and yeah,
art is different from is different there
text.
because, well, no, text and art and music and writings.
Creative.
Yeah, I think creative endeavors are a bit different than driving a car, or then making sure that a person with a likelihood of actually committing another crime actually stays locked up, and the person who doesn't have a high likelihood of committing another crime gets out, right? That's just those things seem to be more in the domain of science. I guess you could separate between these two domains, a creative one and a science-oriented one. And then you could also say, yes, we should remain critical of the AI and keep increasing it, and actually don't turn off our brains, but to let it help us with our brains. If we do that, is it not democratizing it in a sense?
But then please treat AI applications like a car that's run by algorithms instead of your hands on the steering wheel. Treat them the same way you treat a calculator. If I do a maths thing using a calculator, I'm responsible for the results.
Yes.
I can't blame the calculator. So, but then really make the algorithm a personal property of the user, where he or she has full responsibility.
Yes.
And that's something totally different. So if I then publish a text, back to text, but based on ChatGPT, because there are also tendencies now to allow people to shape their text, synthetic text generation programs, and to add their own worldviews and their own language, or specifics of their own language to it. So you can customize AI applications so that they really represent you and what you would want them to be, or how you would want them to decide. And if we go down that road, then it's totally my responsibility for every single word that is there. Same with a car. If if I decide to use a self-driving car, whatever, and then it's not empowering, not just it's really like putting full responsibility on the human.
Yeah. So you extend the human, you augment. So I like this I like to call AI. I like to use this abbreviation to mean augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, because I don't think these are intelligences of their own at all. They're just mathematical models, but they can augment our intelligence, similar to a calculator. I like this analogy to a calculator very much. In the beginning, what we did in math courses, we said, "Oh, you can't use a calculator for the test." I think that's silly, because what is the test for? It's supposed to test you how you operate in real conditions. And in real conditions, you'll have a calculator, obviously. And in fact, we shouldn't learn how to calculate 365 plus 782 anymore, because the calculator can do that faster than we can. What we should instead learn is how how to actually think algorithmically and how to think as a programmers or something like that, or programmers of algorithms, right? So and similarly, maybe for writing courses now, in my opinion, should incorporate ChatGPT instead of saying that you have to write it without it or something like this, or we test you whether you used it or not, and we're going to try to back out whether you used this thing or you didn't use it. But instead, I think we should assume that people use it, and now we should teach them best practices on how to use it and how not to use it. Plagiarism and so on, right? How to avoid plagiarism, all of those things. I mean, I think, as we go forward, we should incorporate the things that people are going to use and assume that they use them and help them use them better instead of just pretending that we're still in the world without them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm absolutely, I agree with you in that regard. It's just that I'm not a cognitive scientist, I'm not a linguistic expert, so I'm not sure about whether there is any danger or risk, if you want, of people losing really essential skills when we kind of deprive ourselves of the capability to write our own text, etc. I'm not sure, how the human brain works, and the saying that every augmentation is an amputation. I mean, how many people are still reading maps? So if your GPS does not work, you just crash into a wall or you drive into the woods because you're just, you can't navigate anymore without it. So, always need to decide there. But of course, I mean, why ignore it? I think there need to be different contexts with different uses of AI, and maybe there should also still be some context where we say, let's train to work without AI. Let's, compare what we create without AI to what we create with AI. So, we need to complement different uses. And is it augmented intelligence or is it complementary intelligence? It's different skills. It's an augmentation, but it's also complementing, but it's certainly not replacing.
Yeah. So
us.
if we augment,
Yeah.
so if we do use, if we do have these machines to augment our intelligence, if we have access somehow to the trained models that are trained on the data that we don't have access to, basically, if we're moving from a world where Google and Amazon have all the data and all the compute power to one where we suddenly have compute power and indirect usage of the data, isn't that a form of democratization, to come back to that? And isn't that, this augmentation makes us all more powerful, right? Isn't this concept of democratization in some ways meant to make the average guy more powerful relative to this one despot that sits there and is the most powerful?
I think it has potential to make people more powerful, but that's not how the tech evangelists use it. That's not what they mean by
No.
it. But in theory, in an ideal world, in a hypothetical world, it has potential to make people more powerful, but it has to, power implies responsibility. So for me, it involves a duty to become more responsible. You cannot become more powerful without becoming more responsible at the same time. So, and then I also think we must not overestimate people. If even now experts still, I mean, many things in machine learning cannot be deciphered and are not explainable. What can an average user do with their own data set that's maybe attractive for, no offense, but nerds like you. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
But no, I think you're a self-proclaimed nerd.
Yeah.
So it's a compliment. Yeah. So, but for like 99% of the users, they just blindly trust it. It's the same with the whole privacy discussion. We're saying we're empowering people. We want informed consent on terms of service, etc. Yeah, of course, you could inform yourself by reading that stuff, but no one does. And so I think it just doesn't correspond to the reality of how humans are.
We've talked a bit about the so-called democratization of algorithms. Maybe we can now talk a little bit about algorithms for and maybe against democracy. Again, how can we use algorithms to enhance or improve democracies? Can we do that? And we know for sure, I mean, maybe we don't have to talk about this because we all know that algorithms can be used to destroy democracies. It's a famous case. So I had a conversation before I talked with you with ChatGPT about this. I asked it, what do you think about democratization of AI? So I wanted to know, and it has obviously, like to no surprise, a bias for algorithms helping democracies, and it really it has a hard time with with all of these criticisms of algorithms. It turns out, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by that, but yeah, let's I guess the most spectacular case that I know of, democracy of four democracies, or is an idea that hasn't yet been implemented, but that was, I guess, spurned by a lot of the issues that we see with democracies.
Is it just me, or are there other people here that are a little bit disappointed with democracy?
A lot of people are actually losing faith in the institutions of democracy. And because of that, and a professor I once had at MIT, I took a course with him, his name is César Hidalgo. He came up with a what he calls a bold idea, and that is, and so I'm going to briefly, summarize it so that we can then discuss it. So the idea is basically to move to a direct democracy, but that is algorithmically mitigated or helped, say. So so really briefly, the idea is that everyone can vote on every single bill. So the bills are still proposed and argued by the senators or Congress people just as they are today, at least in the version 0. He later then also elaborates that there's a possibility that even the writing of the bills themselves could potentially be done collaboratively between 300 million Americans. But for example, in America, or in another country where however many millions of people there are. But the idea would be that everyone can vote on every single bill. I guess that's the case in Switzerland already. Is that right?
Well, not on, well, in theory, we could vote on every single bill, but the usual process is that the parliament drafts bills, and only when there is a referendum, when a certain amount of signatures are collected, we are asked to, for example, because Parliament says we want to have this and this bill, and then someone launches a referendum and collects votes or like signatures, then the population is being asked. Or like direct initiative, if people say we are not happy with an issue and the Parliament does not address it, you can also collect votes. You need more than for the referendum, for direct initiative, and then you can launch an initiative, but that's always aimed at changing the constitution. That's not just a law, it's a constitution, like the highest level.
Oh, incredible. So this is different from the proposition system that we have in the US. In the US, we have this kind of proposition thing, for example, legalization of marijuana. We can bring that up and have a proposition and then vote on these kinds of things. But and this is only for each state. Actually, in the US, it's state by state. But so this idea here is that bills are brought up as traditionally by Congress people or senators, at least in the first version. Later on, the idea would be completely to go to a direct democracy where even the bills themselves are deliberated and brought forth by citizens. But let's put that aside for a second. Let's say there are these bills that magically come out of Parliament, say, and then we've all vote on every single point within them. So not only the bill itself, but even the points it makes within it, right? So we can vote on little amendments and changes of the bill and so on, right? So this is the idea. The obvious problem with that was pointed out by, I think it was Democritus in Greece, that this would be impossible to scale. There is a huge cognitive overload with humans. We cannot read, bills are very, very long texts. That we would have to all digest, each of us, and that this is way too much to demand from citizens. So then the solution to this then is that we do some of that to train a digital twin or a version of ourselves that represents us, or he calls it a little Jiminy Cricket, that can then vote on your behalf after it knows how you would vote. And you can disable it and vote on every single thing yourself, or you can allocate things to the algorithm. So this is the idea, to essentially fix, and so to explain why this idea, we have to first explain, of course, really quickly, what problem does this solve? As with everything else, I think algorithms should always solve a problem that exists, and not just be cool or cute. And so the problem here is the vulnerability that is inherent in representative democracies. That is, that if we have 200 people representing 300 million Americans, for example, well, I don't know, some X amount of number of people representing some Y amount of citizens, right? Where Y is much, much larger than X. Whenever we have this problem, these smaller numbers of representatives are extremely vulnerable to being captured, either by industries or by foreign governments, enemy governments, hostile forces, and so on, right? So there's, in particular, you could think of maybe the Russians helped Donald Trump to be elected, for example, right? Or maybe they were involved in Brexit or something like that, right? So then, we have this problem that we know that we're vulnerable, and one of the proposed solutions is to do this direct democracy that is mediated or helped along by some little avatar perhaps that represents you, or I don't know. I think that's a little bit gimmicky, but the point being that an algorithm basically takes over from you as it learns, and if you change your opinion, you can retrain it, and you can teach it that you've now changed your opinion and that it should take over from your new opinion, and so on. So what is the problem with that?
Well, it's totally, again, it's against the idea of self-legislation, that we're, giving ourselves, we're engaging in deliberation, in the discourse, and we're crafting our laws. And it's a misunderstanding of democracy as just a mouse click exercise, or like a outcome oriented system where at the end, there is a bill or there's no bill, and it totally ignores all the other elements and the whole system of checks and balances that make a democracy wholesome or not wholesome, as the whole parliamentary processes, the role of the courts, the role of the electoral systems, etc. And part of what you describe about the US and the representatives being vulnerable, there are a lot of inherent problems with political system in the US. I mean, every country has its political system with its own problems, but I don't think algorithms are a good fix for that. And also, especially in terms of vulnerability, why should the 300 million voters not be vulnerable? Why can you be sure that I'm not being paid by someone? I can earn money by clicking this or clicking that. I mean, it's you have incentives. Isn't there something like, I don't know if it's in the crypto sphere, where you can play to how you call it? You earn money by gaming or something.
Yeah, sure.
People do all kinds of things, and it also totally ignores the role of experts in democracies. Not everyone is an expert, and of course the way you frame it, or these people frame it, is like the algorithm will be an expert and understand everything, but
No,
it's not. We know that.
I'm not sure about that, but
Okay.
it's more, I think. So if you think of crypto, actually, this is a good analogy, actually, because I guess crypto is borrowing some democratic ideas or something like that. Or ideas of this decentralization. I guess the concept is decentralization, right? So if you have 5 nodes that are vulnerable, you're going to have inherently a much more vulnerable system than if you have 500 vulnerable nodes, because you'd have to attack 500. So you'd basically have to you'd have to sell this gamification thing, or you have to pay 300 million, or maybe not 300 million, but let's say in the US, if you want to win some bill, you'd have to pay half of the people who might be voting, maybe only 60 million people vote or something like this, and then you have to literally pay 30 million people instead of paying 200 people, right? So the idea is just simply to make it less vulnerable by spreading it out further.
I just have a huge issue with that worldview of the view of humans as inherently and inevitably corrupt, and every representative in the parliament is basically co-opted. So, everyone has their own experience. And of course, I am biased because I come from Switzerland with direct democracy and have a different political experience than you, who have spent several decades in the US with all the tragedies of the recent years. But I just like that the starting point, there's so much rotten in the state of.
No, so the assumption isn't that everyone. But I want to just correct this because.
But that's a worldview that we are that's the extremely negative worldview that's also in the decentralization ideology behind cryptocurrencies. Is like the powerful actors are all bad, and
that's
centralization is evil. But then we have libertarian anarchy. And
no. The point is not that
I don't want to go there.
right? So actually, the whole point is that it doesn't have to be everyone. So the whole point is that if you have 200 representatives in the US, say, or 400, I don't know the exact number. I think doesn't really matter how many. Like you have like some number of them. The point is that the question is always how many of them do you have to capture to win the game, right? So it's the assumption is not that everyone is corrupt. Actually, you don't need that. You don't need everyone to be corrupt. You only need to have X number of them to be corrupt, and the other two, and some other proportions being at odds with each other, right? So you need to just capture enough so that you get a majority, which might not actually be that many. It could be as low as 30%. So even Hitler didn't get elected. Now that's I don't want to go that deep into that, but even he didn't get elected by a majority of Germans. It was that the left, the more democratic-minded people were split between 3 or 4 parties, and then just enough of a proportion could be captured by Hitler, right? Or,
but that's coalition building. That's part of the political process. And as a citizen, when I vote, every country probably has that. For example, I inform myself on a website where I can, do a quiz on my political preferences, and where all the candidates for parties have also filled in their, political preferences, and then say, according to your preferences, you have the highest match with this candidate. I'll vote for her. So of course. And then, and this party suits best to your political profile.
Yeah.
And then, I vote, there are ways to inform us and to anticipate.
But it's course grading you, right? It's course grading you. It's saying that, they kind of agree with you on 60% of the things rather than 40% or 30% of the things.
But I need to be able to live with compromise and dissent.
But your vote, your vote could be completely uncompromised. Not to say that the system as a whole. So if 300 million people were to vote, say, or 60 million, or I don't know how many people live in Switzerland, right? If they all vote, and you still end up with a compromise because each one votes differently and they represent themselves and not. But the difference here is that if you have candidates, none of which really represent you, your compromise starts already with the representative, which doesn't represent you.
Well, honestly, then it's my duty to engage in politics. It's not, as I mentioned before, this like radical, decentralized, participatory / libertarian approach to democracy totally ignores the importance of expertise. And even though you can say experts are like one of the biggest, promoters of corruption, and they earn too much money, etc. This whole anti-establishment talk. I'm just not in for it. They play a role. I'm glad that the parliament invites a climate scientist to tell them about global warming, and they listen to it, and then they form their opinion. And of course, they're biased because some of them will be at the same time on the board of a fossil fuel company, etc. But such is life, and life is what happens partially outside of algorithms.
True, but I do think that we have a little bit of a say of what life could possibly also be, right? It could be different. So my point is, I do agree with this expertise aspect of it as well. It's a tricky one because, again, like you said, the climate change expert can be a complete fake, right? They can say, climate change is way overblown, and that's what we see a lot in the US. and the expert comes in with a snowball from the street and shows, oh, look at there, if there's a snowball here, it can't possibly be global warming, right? You can have a complete clown show, and they consider themselves experts, whatever. Some people consider them experts. It can be also co-opted, but that's not really my point. Even it's true that, for example, the EPA and these kinds of systems, they do have serious experts until they get fired by Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Until they get fired by the guy that the majority voted in.
Well,
right?
but that's a problem of the system. I don't
True,
think I don't think you can put algorithms in charge to fix all the problems of a system that has some qualities, and also, as I said, checks and balances between legislation and jurisdiction, etc. The three executive functions, etc. And if you then, in a context where people do not have any habit of direct democracy, where you suddenly put all the responsibility on people to vote on every single bill, you might be surprised. And I'm just mentioning the Brexit example. What happens when you ask the citizens of a country once in their lifetime, suddenly, you're allowed to vote on a referendum or whatever it is, on a law,
the strategically
and then
placed
vote,
one.
and then years later they suffer from their decision because they were not ready for it. And
True.
So I also, the expert thing that I mean is not necessarily experts being cut, but just like, we need experts, or like people that dig deeper into issues, and also parliamentarians who have certain profiles. Like, he is an expert on social policy, she is an expert on tax law, whatever.
Absolutely. But this could still exist.
You can't democratize that or decentralize that.
You could think of it as a modular. You could think of it as a modular system where the courts still exist as before. You don't have to change everything at once, right? You could change a little piece. And so the idea would be, and so not necessarily the expert part is that's a good point, and you could think of how to accommodate that, right, within a new system, or what I guess what César Hidalgo is suggesting is to simply change this one piece, right, which is this Parliament or House of Representatives, where the only thing would change is how bills are voted on, right? Whether they're voted on by 400 representatives or whether they voted on by 300 million Americans, right? So nothing else changes. Everything else stays the same except for this aspect. And then these 300 million can then opt to sometimes automate their vote after they know that it does what they think it does, and it does. And they can observe the algorithm for a while without actually letting it vote and make their own votes. And then after some time, to sort of go on automate until they change their mind and then retrain it or something.
Nightmare. It just reminds me so much of a portfolio simulation. I'm using a robo-advisor to invest my money, and where you could also do a virtual portfolio without really investing, and see how the funds that you chose develop. And okay, I simulate. Okay, seems to be a good thing. Now I go live. But I mean, it ignores the whole discursive and deliberative element of and the whole virtue element of democracy, of exchanging ideas, etc. It's such a black box, isolated approach. Everyone in front of their computer interacting with an algorithm that has necessarily, inevitably been trained on biased data, that never understands context, that is limited the way it is. This algorithm being imposed or like served to a population that is very susceptible to misinformation and manipulation, and that in a highly polarized political climate. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure.
That's interesting, right?
Because to add fuel to fire.
No, I think what we might want to do there, then, you're right. Right now we have a lot of misinformation in particular ways, but one could argue that it is actually much more difficult to misinform people on every single bill than it would be to misinform them about a handful of politicians. And so basically what I'm saying here is that misinformation is made easier. To mislead people to vote for one guy, like a guy who says "Make America Great Again" or something like this, is super easy because you have this one target. It's simple, right? It's easier to direct your funds toward misinforming people about 2 or 3 politicians or 5 politicians than it is to constantly misinform them on every issue that comes up. So maybe the incentive structure now would change with it.
So yeah, you're saying the points of attack are like more decentralized, but honestly, it will just be a fight for the masses, manipulate the masses, and there will be a war of information, etc.
As it is,
I don't.
already.
But yeah, it is. But I mean, as I said,
The incentive structure is part of the problem of democracy, right? If you look at the incentives, like right now, if the incentives of for people who are not very well, let's say, who are not who have, I mean, there's some comedians who actually make fun of it. Where could this guy, and then they show the politician, get a job, right? Oh, the only place is in parliament, right? And this is this is where we are currently, right? The incentives are.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a duty of parliaments and citizens to change the system, and I don't think, I mean, the algorithmic solution is what we should aim for.
So you're against algorithms entirely in government?
Well, no, I mean, if you say algorithms to discover irregularities in counting votes or whatever for fraud detection, that's okay, but certainly never ever algorithms for political decision making, because it's our duty, and it's our skill that we have.
Yeah, we're talking about, but then the representatives, it's like we're still stuck with these representatives who are, that's the part I think that a lot of people are disillusioned by the current institutions, precisely because they can be so easily captured by a few people.
Yeah.
That I think is Okay, well let's cap it there. Maybe okay. So so I see you're saying that it's good for maybe disinformation, keeping disinformation in check, helping with fake news detection, those sorts of things. You're okay with
analytics, but not decision making, not delegating decisions.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was great speaking with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
This show is published every Wednesday at 5 a.m. on the East Coast, 2 a.m. on the West Coast, and 10 a.m. in London, UK. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to this channel and tell us what you like and what you don't like by putting up a thumbs up on videos you enjoy and thumbs down on videos that you don't enjoy so much. And please let us know why you enjoy something and what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. Next week, I will be meeting with Alan Tammany, and we will be talking about large language models. In particular, ChatGPT is one of those.
A large language model is effectively it's where AI is at the moment, really, when it comes to sort of interacting with the real world.